Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On September 2nd or September 4th, 2018, Delshia Perry was notified that her son, Hardell Sherrell, died in Beltrami County Jail. She was told that he collapsed in law enforcement's arms and that they tried to resuscitate when of what actually happened. She found
Thank you, everyone, for coming out here today. September 2nd, 2018, Hardell Sherrell died in Beltrami County Jail after days of neglect, days of pain, days of suffering, and days of fighting for his life. It's been a long time getting here, but finally we learned last week that Keith Ellison's office has filed charges against Michelle Skrock for second-degree manslaughter, and also 2 counts of felony criminal neglect. Hardell should have been here today. He wasn't doomed to die. He had a condition that was treatable. He wasn't faking as everybody thought he was. He wasn't trying to escape as everybody thought he was. He was only fighting for his life. If he had gotten the medical care that he needed, if he had been treated like a human being, if he received the basic medical care that was required for his condition, he would have survived. He would have been here today. Unfortunately, he's not here anymore. He left 3 beautiful girls behind, grieving parents and friends. Hardell was not the first person to die due to medical neglect, and he also wasn't the last. Since his death almost 7 years ago, many others have died in jails across the state due to medical neglect. We have said from the beginning that our goal has been to get justice for Hardell. Our goal has been to get accountability for what happens behind jail doors. But most importantly, our goal is to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone again. We want to preserve life. We don't want any more children left without parents. And we don't want any more grieving mothers like Delshia Perry, who has been struggling in grief for years. This is the first case, to our knowledge, in Minnesota history where a jail medical provider has been criminally charged due to medical neglect. We've seen many cases in Minnesota where police officers are charged for excessive force in criminal court, but this is the first time where a medical provider is charged resulting from a jail death. Again, we hope for accountability. We thank Keith Ellison's office and David Hansen from Beltrami County Attorney's Office for taking the time to thoroughly investigate the case. And we hope that this case will bring an end to the suffering that happens in jails across the state and will bring an end to these unjustified and preventable deaths that continue to happen even to this day. Thank you.
Can you spell your name real quick?
Yes, Zorislaveyderman.
And so when this happened, it caused a lot of trauma to Delshia. She's lost a brother, she's lost other family members since this happened, and she still had to continue fighting. She also started an organization called Be Their Voices, and she was also able to fight for families who have lost a loved one in jail, including the May family and the Beltrami family that recently died here in St. Paul. So again, it didn't just traumatize Delshia, it traumatized her sister, it traumatized her brothers, it traumatized her cousins, uncles, nephews, and it traumatized our community. Next, we have Michelle Gross, who's also been fighting since day one of this event from Communities United Against Police Brutality.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Gross, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E-G-R-O-S-S. I'm a paralegal, and I happen to work for Mr. Lederman, and I got a call on a Sunday morning from Traherne and his sister Delshia telling me what happened to her son in the Beltrami County Jail. I immediately knew what had actually happened, that he had died from a lack of medical care. These charges, which are historic, are very important because people who provide medical care to people in jails need to recognize that their obligation is to their patient, not to some for-profit medical organization. This is essential. We have to remember that most of the people in jails are innocent because they haven't been convicted of anything. They haven't even had a trial yet. But even if they were proven guilty, and the same goes for people in the prison system, the punishment is the loss of your freedom, not a lack of medical care. That can never be an acceptable way that we punish people. And we have resorted through the various carceral institutions in this state to having private providers, for-profit providers, be the medical care providers. And their incentive is to give less care, not more. And in the case of Hardell Sherrell, they literally did not want to give this man care. Michelle Scott got charged, and I'm very grateful for that. And I appreciate the work of the Office of Attorney General Keith Ellison, as well as David Hansen's office out of Beltrami County. These are important things, but there are other people that I believe need to be charged as well, and I'm hoping that we see those charges materialize. And I want these charges to be a lesson to medical providers in the jails and prisons that your obligation is to your patient, not to some for-profit healthcare provider. That is absolutely the message. You are to pay attention to your patient. You are not to say, oh, he might be faking, get off the floor. I will tell you, as the paralegal that worked on this case, I looked at many, many, many videos, and it was obvious to see him that Hardell was desperately ill. It was obvious to see that he wasn't faking. There's no way in the world. This guy couldn't move his legs. He couldn't move his arms. He had Guillain-Barré Syndrome, which is a syndrome that causes progressive paralysis. It moves up your legs and up to your upper body and eventually paralyzes your rib cage so that you can no longer breathe. These things were obvious, and you could see them on the video. It is appalling to me that any nurse can walk around him and say, get off the floor, you're faking. Even with the vital signs being wildly abnormal, with an abnormal EKG and things like that, they basically would refuse to believe what their eyes were telling them about him and decided that, they put a particular narrative in their head and they stuck with it no matter what. And this to me is appalling. Medical people, be advised, you will pay a price if you neglect your patients. Thank you.
And there's a lot of reasons why black people don't like to go to the doctor, don't trust medical practices, and this is what happened to Hardell Sherrell is the reason why. And that's part of our history. Next we have JT. He's the cousin of Hardell Sherrell, and he's going to come up and talk about what Hardell meant to him.
fact that he got no medical attention is crazy. But I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for my auntie because she's been fighting for this for too long. It don't even make no sense. It's like 6 years? Come on. Gotta do better than that, man. I miss my cousin. Like, I just moved back here 2 years ago. It don't even feel the same being in Minnesota because I lost him and my older cousin. Them was the only two that was coming for me when I came back. I didn't have to say nothing about nothing. When I got off the flight, they already there. Hardel's heart was so huge, man. And they took that from us, man.
And so again, Hardell left behind four girls, three girls, and they ask about him all the time. And sometimes they see some of the news or see stuff in the paper, and they're asking about their dad. So again, the trauma that law enforcement causes in our community is devastating, and we're excited that the AG is going to take on this case. Next, we have Delshia Perry, from the mother of Hardell Sherrell. Please give her a big round of applause.
First and foremost, I want to give God the glory. I thank God because it is His grace that I'm even able to stand here today. I thank God for everyone that has come around me and my family to give us support, love, prayers, my church family, and of course, the Attorney General. And I just thank God that they saw what we had seen all along. I thank God for the work that my attorney did, and Michelle Gross, all of the activists. There's so many, I can't even name them all, but they have stood in the gap with us. They have gone in the trenches and they have put boots on the ground year after year after year. So this feels like some small vindication, because as I said, no matter who gets criminally charged and what their sentence may be, it will never compare to the sentence that I got, which was a life sentence. My baby is gone, and there isn't a day that goes by that I am not thinking about him, missing him. And I even thought that maybe, just maybe, things would get a little bit better as the time has gone on, but no, it's actually gotten harder because he's not there. I just thank God that finally we are starting to see some justice in this case, because it's been long overdue. And my prayer is that she won't be the only one charged, because everyone that was there, anybody that had a part and saw what was going on, they stood by and did absolutely nothing when he begged for his life. He even sent a kite and said, please be quick about this because I cannot feel my legs and I'm in excruciating pain. And still they stood by and did nothing. So I thank God that we are finally starting to see some justice in this case.
So you, next we have Ash from Freedom Fund, and Danielle from Freedom Fund.
My name is Danielle Mathias. I'm a senior organizer at the Minnesota Freedom Fund. We are here today because medical neglect in our county jails is not just a crisis. It's a violation of basic human rights. Through MFF's Court Watch program, we've seen time and time again that people in custody are denied essential medical care, putting their lives at risk. The image you see here isn't just an illustration. It's a real-life moment that we observed in the Hennepin County Courthouse. A man trapped behind glass, pleading for his medication. I've been up for 4 days because I haven't had my medication. This is not an isolated incident. This is happening every single day in our county jails. And let me be clear, no one should have to beg for their medication. No one should have to beg for medical treatment. No one should be subjected to cruel and preventable suffering simply because they are in the custody of our county jails. Denying medical care is not just neglect, it is abuse. This is exactly why the Hardell Sherrell Act was passed, because Hardell Sherrell died in a Minnesota County jail after being denied medical care, despite repeated cries for help. His death was preventable, but laws mean nothing when they are not enforced. And this is why we must also support the Larry R. Hill Medical Reform Act, which strengthens protections for people in custody in our county jails. So today, we're demanding accountability. We call on judges to take medical neglect seriously when they hear them in arraignment court and ensure immediate intervention when someone's health is at risk. We call on prosecutors to stop pushing for incarceration when we know that our jails have proven time and time again to not be able to provide proper care. We call on jail staff, medical professionals, and county officials to truly comply with the Hardell Sherrell Act and to support the Larry R. Hill Medical Reform Act. Because failing to do so is not just negligence, it's a matter of life and death. We call on our legislators in this building today to pass the Larry R. Hill Medical Reform Act and set clear, enforceable standards for medical care in our correctional facilities. And we call on community to keep on watching, to advocate and demand justice, because the more we expose these injustices, the harder it is for them to be ignored. We refuse to wait for another preventable jail death to happen. This must end now. Danielle, D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E, Matthias, M-A-T-T-H-I-A-S, Senior Organizer at Minnesota Freedom Fund.
And so some of the next steps that we'll be talking about is, you've heard just talk about passing the Larry Hill Medical Reform Act, House File number 264. Also, there are amendments to the Hardell Sherrell Act that we wanted to make, that Delcia wanted to be passed last year, and they didn't get passed, so we strongly encourage those to be passed this year. And there's also a reparations bill, the Minnesota Migration Act, that talks about acknowledges what happened to Hardell Sherrell and calls for more legislation to prevent that from happening. Also, the trial will begin April 11th in Beltrami County up in Bemidji. So anyone who can make it up there, we strongly encourage you to be present for that court date. Are there any questions? Brixton.
I know a few years back there was some interaction with the for-profit medical company that did this. I can't quite remember what happened. You want to give us an update on that? Or
Yeah, it was yeah.
Michelle Skrock, who's the defendant in this criminal case, she worked for a company called Mend Correctional Care. Mend Correctional Care provided contracts to numerous jails across the state. They had nurses and other medical staff available under contract to provide care, and Beltrami County was one of those counties. Mend no longer is operating in the state of Minnesota. Mend went bankrupt. And that happened after we exposed what happened to Hardell and other similar cases. But yes, if that was your question, she worked for a company called Mend, but they're no longer operating in the state.
not in Minnesota, but elsewhere?
I don't believe Mend is operating anywhere. To my knowledge, Mend went out of business and they're not operating in any state at this point.
What advice do you have for incarcerated inmates that are in those
public jails and prisons and private for-profit jails and prisons. When they run into a situation where they can't get the medical care they need, say they have diabetes, they can't get their insulin, what advice or recourse do you have for those inmates that are in there right now at public and private for-profit jails and prisons? What recourse do they have?
You know, sadly, giving advice to, from here to people who are incarcerated is very difficult. One of the problems of why we're here is because people who are incarcerated cannot choose for themselves what care they get. They have to rely on the people who are there to provide them care. The only advice I can give is to keep a record of what's happening, try to reach out to your loved ones, to explain what you're experiencing. Hardell did speak to Ms. Perry before he died. That was helpful. But our hope is that people will not go through what Hardell went through. And the reason why these deaths keep happening is because people who are in jails and prisons, they have no resources, they have no ability. And when you're stuck in your cell, when you're paralyzed, you can't move, you can't talk, you can't eat, you can't even go to the bathroom, you have no recourse. You are there and you're limited to whatever the medical providers and the jail staff are willing to give you.
Can I, let me,
Yes.
let me say, if you're, the Hardell Sherrell Act, if you're in jail, what's it, when you come into, what's the form you get?
That's what Michelle, I think, was going to talk about.
There's a couple of things that, advice-wise, because I not only work on these cases from a, helping with the legal team, but I also am an advocate in the community on these cases. And one of the first things I say to families when they call is that they need to get on the phone with health services and demand that that person get care. This is not something you can remain silent on. The more people that call, the more likely it is that a person's going to get care. And often I get on the phone with health services and tell them that that person needs care and outline what that care should look like. And so, this is not a thing to be quiet about and wait till later. It's a thing that you need to engage with right away and that sort of thing. In addition, part of the Hardell Sherrell Act requires jails to collect the name and telephone number and contact information of someone who can be notified if they become debilitated. And the jails are required to do this, not that all of them are, but they are required to follow the law and collect that information so that family members or other loved ones can know that what's happening with that person earlier rather than later. So that's another kind of thing. But again, we, don't wait. If somebody's not getting their medication, if somebody has fallen ill and they're not getting help, then people should get on that phone and just stay on that phone with health services until that person gets the care they need.
Also, I would say there's a, when you come, it's called an inmate advocate form. So if you're in jail, it's called, in Minnesota, it's called an inmate advocate form. And that will allow you to be able to contact your loved ones and tell them about your health situation. And that's a result of the work that Delcia Perry did with the Hardell Sherrell Act. Also, you can contact Black Lives Matter Minnesota. You can have your loved ones contact Communities United Against Police Brutality, Racial Justice Network, or Twin Cities Coalition Justice for Jamal.
Can you tell us something about your son that you want a lot of people to know about him? Just give us a little description about him, how much he means to you.
Yes, he was a very loving, kind individual, had a huge heart, and as my nephew said, he would give the shirt off his back. He was the life of the party. Hardell was a very unselfish individual. In fact, here's a man, this should tell you what type of person he was. Here's a man who's dying. I didn't know he was dying. I just thought he was really sick. He said, please, be quick about it. If that had been anybody else, they probably would have chose some other adjectives that would have not been so nice. But my son was very kind in asking, please, somebody, be quick about this. So yeah, Hardell was a very amazing young man. And by him being my only child, he and I were best friends. I was my little guy, even though he was almost 6'4". And we did everything together. And he is so missed.
Any more questions?
Could you explain the charges a little bit more? type of time is Michelle facing, and potentially who would be the other folks that would be charged or that would want to see charged?
The charges against her, she has 3 counts. The first count is for second-degree manslaughter, and the other 2 counts are for criminal neglect, different varieties of criminal neglect. In Minnesota, we have the sentencing guidelines, so that judges follow some sort of a accepted pattern for sentencing people who are convicted of crimes. Things that are going into consideration is the person's criminal history, if they have any prior history or not, and also the severity of the offense. So the higher the level of the severity and the more prior criminal history, the higher the sentence. People who have less criminal history and commit a less serious offense can expect to get a lesser sentence. In this particular case, the charges which are included in the complaint against Nurse Kroc are severity level 8 charges, and these charges, even for a person with no criminal history, call for a 48-month prison sentence. So that's according to the Minnesota sentencing guidelines. This is a standard that prosecutors and judges have to follow in terms of processing criminal cases and criminal sentences.
Any more questions?
Yeah, would there be other people who would, like, would Kalana Allen in jail, the person who was in charge of Beltrami at the time, would she be somebody that you all would be looking for and potentially have charges against them as well?
We don't have the ability to prosecute anyone. Criminal charges are left to government authorities. Keith Ellison has the authority to initiate criminal charges, and David Hansen does. We provided everything that we were asked. When we were asked for evidence, information, we turned over the things that we legally could turn over. And we did request charges against everyone who was responsible for taking care of Hardell. Like I said, ultimately, it's not in our hands who gets charged, but our understanding is that other charges may be coming in this case. But again, it's not something that's up to us, and it's not a decision we can make.
Michelle Rose, do you know why did it take so long for them to bring charges up against this individual?
We don't. What we were told is that that they had to do a thorough review. And I can tell you, as somebody who did look at the records, along with Mr. Lederman, there are a lot of records in this case. There are a lot of videos and things like that. So, but I can't answer for that particular thing. What I do want to say, however, is this: Hardell Sherrell is not the only person who has died even in Beltrami County Jail, let alone any other jail. In the average year, we normally have about 8 to 10 people who die in jails across the state of Minnesota, including during COVID. But in 2023, we had 22 people die in jails. And that, to me, is shameful. People should not go into a jail and die. We don't have a single, any kind of crime in this state that allows for a death penalty. And again, remember that people in the jails are largely not guilty of anything. And even if they were guilty, the penalty would never be the death penalty. And more than that, the penalty would never be a lack of medical care. Yes. So I just want to throw that out as well. We have a really serious problem. This is not an isolated situation. We have a serious problem with the lack of proper medical care in the jails in this state. Thank you.
And are there any more questions? We really want to think, when this first happened, it was reported in the news that Hardell had died of pneumonia, and that wasn't true. And so we want to thank Unicorn Riot. I want to thank Fox 9 News. Unicorn Riot broke the story, and it really, all of the media, but first Unicorn Riot broke the story, and the way they did it was really, really great. Then Fox 9 did some great coverage. Kara 11 did really, really great coverage and continues to do so. And then basically all the news channels in Minnesota have been doing great coverage lately, and we hope that that starts a new way of news coverage in the state of Minnesota as it pertains to law enforcement and how it deals with black lives going forward, because that hasn't always been the case. So we thank you for your transformative reporting on these type of issues.
Say his name.
Hardell Sherrell.
What's his name?
Hardell Sherrell.
Say his name.
Hardell Sherrell.
What's his name?
Hardell Sherrell. Justice for?
Hardel Sherrell.
Justice for?
Hardel Sherrell.
Justice for?
Hardel Sherrell.
Say his name.
Hardel Sherrell.
Say his name.
Hardel Sherrell.
Say his name.
Hardel Sherrell.
Say his name.